Today we have with us Ma'am Aditi Banerjee. She is the co-founder and CEO of Magic Billion, a global talent management company which supports global employers to find high-quality skilled Indians. The startup is currently operating in 10 countries across 20 job roles. In 2022 itself, the order book is for 2,000 candidates for various international destinations. Prior to this, she spent a 12-year career in development finance. During this time, Aditi ma'am has worked at the HRH Prince Charles founded British Asian Trust in London, the Boston Consulting Group in Delhi, and the World Bank in Washington, D.C. Aditi ma'am is an economist by training and has worked in over 15 emerging markets with a focus on creating systematic change through data-driven decision-making. She also sits on the board of the Breakfast Revolution, a not-for-profit organization targeting malnutrition in Indian children. She is an advisor to the BRICS Chamber of Commerce and Industry and was a finalist at the Asian Women of Achievement Awards in the UK 2019 for public services. Now, I would request Aditi ma'am to address the gathering.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you to XIMB for inviting me for this. Indeed, great to have 80 of you listening to our journey and what we have to say on the topic, really. So look, I mean, honestly, a keynote address for 40 minutes is not my style. I won't know what to say for 40 minutes. So I have a few things that I wanted to cover with you all, and then I would love to get questions and respond to questions. I'm much better in that Q&A style. Yeah. So, well, maybe best to start off with my journey, how I started off, what we do as a company, and some of the key learnings, perhaps, for me as an entrepreneur. Everybody has a different journey. So I won't say these are the learnings for all entrepreneurs, but definitely for me, I'll be happy to share that. So starting off, look, I'm a chance entrepreneur, right? I never set out to be an entrepreneur. And I think there are many people out there globally who very early in their lives, they know that they want to start their own companies and they want to grow something and all of that. But that's not how my background was. I was a very sort of traditional upbringing in that sense in India. So, you know, my father was in the army. So I was an army kid, went to 12 schools growing up, then went to LSR, studied economics there, moved to the US for my master's, went across the pond to the World Bank. I was there for 6 years, worked in the Middle East, North Africa for 6 years on climate change, disasters, a lot of various operational projects. Post that, I was looking for an organization where I could move from ops to thinking and strategic thinking, and what better place than to go to BCG. So I moved from the US after 8 years to Delhi, which is also my hometown. And then I was with BCG for 3 years in Delhi, helped build the social impact practice for BCG, worked on a lot of very, very interesting projects on so many, where to start, but primarily on skill development, building livelihoods, supporting state governments, thinking through their skilling programs, which are, their budgets are in billions. So really helping them think about how to build skilling for their own state governments. So from all of that, then moved out of India and moved into impact investing and venture funds, and then moved into a couple of health tech funds. And then finally, I was at the British Asian Trust, which is Prince Charles's fund here in the UK, where we were looking at making a lot of education and livelihoods investments in South Asia. So really looking at building out development impact bonds. So I did that for a few years as well. And so while I was doing that, you can see from my career that it's been a very sort of traditional finance-based, working in large organizations kind of a background. And I was very happy doing that, to be honest. And if someone had asked me back at LSR, where do you see yourself in 20 years? I would have said probably a CEO of an MNC. That's what I had in mind for myself. And then, like I said, I'm a chance entrepreneur. So My husband went to INSEAD for his MBA. So we were in France. And as you do, we were visiting one of our friends for his wedding in Romania. And he was a second generation entrepreneur, in the sense that his father had started a heavy machinery company in Romania. So, you're sitting in the car with him and asking him, how is his company doing, which all of us ask our friends. And he said, it's great, but the only problem is we don't have any people in Romania. So I've got these huge orders coming in for various machinery parts from Europe, and I don't have any people on my shop floor. So I said, okay, where are all the people? So he said, well, all the Romanians want to go to Western Europe because Romania is part of Schengen. So they want to go there. And all the young talent don't want to be on machine floors. They'd rather be in IT and other white collar jobs. So the average age in my shop floor is 62. So, immediately, as any Indian, the first thing you think of is 1.3 billion sitting at home, right? So my first thought was, how can I help him? Because obviously, I'm sure there are enough and more Indians who want to go to Romania. Who wouldn't? It's Europe, after all. So as it happened, my father, who had been part of this entire skilling ecosystem in India. So he was part of, he was the number 2 guy at the National Skill Development Corporation in India. So I knew he had a lot of networks in this space. So I gave him a call to say, can we help him? Just as a friend to friend, can we help him? And that became the business idea. And Emil then, who's the friend in Romania, became our first client. And that's how we set up Magic Billion. So what does Magic Billion do? Magic Billion supports global employers like my friend in Romania who are struggling to find good talent. So these are typically small and medium-sized employers. These are not the Googles of the world. These are the small and medium-sized employers who are, this addressable market is currently at 10 to 15 billion, right? It's huge. So these are employers who can't find talent in their own domestic economies. They're not finding talent in their neighboring countries, and they don't know how to grow their companies because nobody is thinking of going all the way to the other part of the world and get people from India. That's where we come in. So we get orders of hundreds at this point, 2,000 as was mentioned here, where we bring in order books for blue collar, white collar, gray collar roles from various employers globally, currently in 10 countries. We then get Indian talent who want to be part of those jobs. We organize the interview process. If there's any upskilling required or any certification required to go to that foreign country, we manage all of that. And then finally, we manage the visa paperwork and ensure that this person goes and actually settles down well, whichever country they're going to. So it's a 360-degree global talent management company, 360-degree for the employer. They don't have to go to anybody else. Everything is managed. 360-degree for the Indian from India. They don't have to worry about anything. Once they come into Magic Billion, we've got it sorted for them. Right, so that's what we do. It's been a 4-year journey so far. For the first couple of years, we were testing out our product market fit. And, Emil was one example, but obviously we had to see if there was a bigger market out there, if this really was something that we could grow into a $1 billion company, right? So we gave it a couple of years where I continued with my job and my co-founder, who's also my father, continued with his existing job. And after a couple of years, we realized, okay, there's enough here for us to now quit whatever we are doing and leave those 1.5 CR salaries that we had been earning. And now let's dive in. So we did. And I think 6 months after we dove in, COVID hit. And we were in the market of global mobility. And with COVID, all the borders were shut. So we came to this point where, of course, as any entrepreneur, you start thinking, okay, did I make the right decision? Is this the right market? Today it's COVID, tomorrow it could be something else. How do we manage geopolitics in a company like ours? That will never be in our control. So that's when we started our second vertical. So we pivoted and we started our second vertical, which was pure play upskilling. There's a huge market there. So really, looking at providing German language training, Japanese language training, providing IT upskilling, all these kinds of upskilling programs, so that candidates who enroll for those programs know as soon as they get out, Magic Billion has the jobs, which we will then provide to them. So that became the vertical which really picked up. And for countries like Germany, etc., most SMEs are looking for people who can speak their language. So now we are doing, I think, 800 people just to Germany, where they get their offer letters from employers, which are conditional to them learning German. They then learn German with us, and then we ensure that the movement to that country happens. So that pivot really worked out for us. And now, of course, from a 4-person team 2 years ago, we are a 40-person team. And very soon, I mean, if my VP sales is to be believed, he's looking to hire 30 more people in the next two months. So there's a lot of growth. We have expanded our geographic scope. We started out with 2 countries, but now we are in 10. We have expanded in terms of the job roles itself that we manage for. But most importantly, what I'm noticing is there's a lot of interest in India from state governments, from various organizations who have these amazing talent pool of candidates from India who are so ambitious. They really want to make it. And I think it's a very, every day feels good doing what I do and what we do as a team, because once you get somebody to move to a foreign country and they settle down there, you've just created a lifetime change in their life. Their livelihood change, how they talk, how they walk, everything changes. And you've been a little part of that journey for them. So that's what we do. What else can I tell you? I think one thing I was reflecting when I was invited for this, when I was at LSR, which was almost 17 years ago now, we never spoke about startups. It was always which big company are you going to go and join? And the fact that there's a keynote today, from a startup founder to talk about her journey, and I know you've got many others who are coming and speaking to you, it really shows the shift that has happened in India, where, just in a matter of 15 years, there are so many of you who are curious about what can you do on your own? Can you make it on your own? And how to make it on your own? And these kinds of conversations which we are having today. So I was doing a little bit of digging because, of course, we all know, India has got so many unicorns which has come out already this year. The valuations are going through the roof. VC funding is, escalating everything globally. India is the number 2 market where the startups are coming out after the US. So we know all of this. But when you dig deep into these statistics, you realize things that we go through every day, which is 9 out of 10 startups fail, right? In a 10-year journey, 9 out of 10 startups will fail. So what does that mean for you as someone who's aspiring perhaps either to be an entrepreneur yourself or to join another startup out there? What does that mean for you? And these are questions which I think are worth thinking about, as you're getting into the market. So when you look at the reasons for the failures of the startups, they're typically about 3 or 4 reasons, big reasons. I'm sure there are many smaller reasons, but the big 4 pillars are either you don't have the right product market fit, right? So the market existed today, but 5 years down, that market doesn't exist. Or the market exists, but your product becomes redundant, right? So when you're getting into this sector, to always think about the product market fit in the future is extremely important, right? For us, if I make it personal, yes, with automation, I think the requirement of Indian talent or any kind of talent will reduce, but it will never go away because there will always be roles where only humans can do that, right? So think about your product market fit. Think about whatever company you want to join. What is the longevity plan that they have? Is this going to be around? So that's the first. Second, very important thing, which I think anybody getting into this needs to be aware of, is your competition. Are you doing something which others have done before and failed? Are you doing something where others are successful? What is that key ingredient you are bringing to the table when you're doing what you're doing? Very, very important to think about that. If your competition overtakes you, within 2 years, everything you've built will go. So think about who's out there. So when we started doing this, initially we thought we are playing in the green field, right? So scope and lots to do, green field, let's do this. When we jumped into it, we realized it's actually blue ocean. Nobody is doing half the things we are doing. And that's the kind of market you want to get into, right? So think about who's your competition, what's out there, and what is that competitive advantage, that little extra thing which will make that big difference in the company or the product that you are bringing to the market. Second, the third big thing I think is having a really good team and having a really good co-founder. I have a lot of respect for people who do it on their own. I have some friends who've started their own companies alone. And I have a lot of respect because I think there are many, many such points when you want to discuss something. And in the initial years of your startup, you want to discuss it every day, probably every hour. And if you don't have a thinking buddy who sort of got your vision for where you want to take the company, it's tough. So definitely have a well thought through co-founder and have a good team that you can build. And some of that team will come because of your vision. Some of that team will come because of you. And some of that team will come for the money, very simply, right? And some of them will come for the growth. But really getting a good team, you'll probably initially start out with a C team, then you'll get to the B team, and finally you'll get to the A team, which will take you on growth, right? So think about your team. That's important. Fourth, very critical, perseverance. You cannot be a startup founder if every time, sorry, but like shit hits the fan and you feel, okay, I can't go on. If you decide at that point, let's wrap up, you'll wrap up. You've got to keep it going. You've got to keep it going till the time either you're completely out of cash or you're completely out of energy or it's taking a toll on your mental health, whatever it is. But let it be the final straw to close the company. But before that, keep going, because remember the days that actually took you to start that company, why you did it. Keep that why close. So that's important. So perseverance, very, 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 very important. And the last thing I would say there is the ability to take risks. I think a couple of days ago, I was watching this movie called The Founder, which maybe some of you have seen. It's about the journey of Ray Kroc and how he built out McDonald's as the huge billion-dollar company that it is, multiple billion-dollar company that it is. It was actually started by two brothers, right, in San Francisco. But they could never take it to the vision and the scale that Ray Kroc had. So, and the reason they couldn't is because they didn't want to take those risks. He took it to what it is. And of course, those brothers are not involved in the company anymore. But the whole point is you have to take risks. So when COVID hit, and I was telling you, we were at those crossroads of what do we do now? Because people can't move out of India. So how do we bring business into the country? If we had said, okay, let's pack up, today we wouldn't have had Magic Billion. But the fact that we pivoted, and we didn't know if the pivot would work, but it worked. So the ability to take that risk is something, whether it is joining a new startup or it is building your own, you've got to have that risk-taking ability. So those 5 things I think are really key to anyone here out of the 86 of you who want to think about this as a strong journey for yourself. What else would I want to share with you? A few things that you struggle with, perhaps, because that's important. It's not always a beautiful journey. It is a beautiful journey, but it's not always a beautiful journey. So the first thing I think that I personally struggle with is hiring, getting good talent, even for our own company, even though we are giving it to the rest of the world, but for our own company. And one of the key reasons for this is not because we're not doing good work. It's not because we don't have growth. It's because the VCs have come and put in so much money into India that all salaries have been jacked up. So if Byju's, let's say, is my part competition and they have, these $1 billion to throw around on hiring, even though we are providing better than average salaries, they're not best in class salaries. right? So how to bring and retain good talent, I think is something that we're definitely struggling with. We have a very, very good team. We have a very passionate team, keeping performance at the core of what they do. But given the pace at which we are growing, I mean, if you're looking at 30 people in the next month and a half, and then 30 the next month and a half, and growing in that pace, we need to get really, really good people who stay with us. And I think that's something that I always struggle with. So any of you here who are looking to intern with us, definitely give us a holler. And the other thing I think is trust building in any new startup, but particularly in the overseas placements sector, which is where we are. The sector is ridden with scams. You open the newspaper any day, and you will hear about stories of how lakhs have been taken for people and the offices have disappeared, right? So we are operating in a market where we are guilty until we are proven innocent. And that's something I think which is a long journey for us to make that trust in the mind of our B2C customers, which is the Indian youth, for them to feel, okay, if there's one credible place that I want to go to in my journey abroad, I go to Magic Billion, which is our 5-year vision for our B2C clients. So those are the two things that we are constantly sort of struggling with. The good thing about when we started the company, because I started it when I was 33, my father was 63. So we had enough, cash to put into the company. So we didn't require a lot of external support, and we still don't. So one of the things, again, that I often think about, and I'm often asked is, do you want to raise a round? Do you want to go and get some VC funding in? And many, many pros and cons to that. So that's something which, we can park for another discussion. But I think at your age and time in life, obviously we would not expect that you have perhaps cash reserves, full of cash reserves to go and flush it into your companies. But many companies start with just $5,000 to $10,000, and that's something I'm sure you can put together if you do think of starting your own companies. I think 70% companies start at home, which is how ours did. So you don't need the fancy offices, and you don't need any of that. And particularly with COVID, look at us now. I'm at home doing this Zoom with you. So, don't think about how much money will be required. Where do I go to get this going? If you have the right idea, if you have the right people around you to start it, start it. You start small, you build, but don't not do it because you feel intimidated by the build. The build will come, and people will rally around you when they realize that the start itself has been a good one. Yeah. So last three things, just for me to share. This is outside of even entrepreneurship. I think these are just my 3 tenets. I live by it, and I have a 2-year-old daughter, and I know that these are things I will always tell her as well. Make your own decisions and stick to your own decisions. Particularly difficult, I think, in Indian society, where we have so many people around us wanting to opine, and our parents have their ideas, our friends have their ideas, peer pressure, all of that. But try to just get out of that noise and find your own decision, something you want to do. And this could be in a startup or just in your life. Because when you decide something that you want to do, you will take full accountability and responsibility for it. Because then there are no excuses. Then there is no, but this one said and that one said. It's yours. Own it. So first would be just, make your decisions and own your decisions. That's the first thing. The second is just dealing with failure. This is, especially I think in the last few years, I've been hearing so much about people getting depressed because they couldn't live up to their own expectations or somebody else's expectations, mental health challenges, all of these things, because you're setting up expectations for yourself which are sky high, and then realizing perhaps the preparation wasn't enough, or there were external factors because of which you couldn't reach there, and then being so depressed about that failure. So there will be failure. I don't think I know anybody in this 37-year journey of mine where a person has not experienced personal or professional failure. And that's okay. That's fine. Dissect the failure to understand what happened, where did I go wrong, and next time just learn from it and do better. But failure is fine. It's okay. So that's the second. And then the third bit is something I truly live by. Surround yourself with positivity. Positive people, positive influencers on social media, positive tools for reaffirmation for yourself. Just cut out the negative noises around you. And there'll be a lot of these negative Nellies, they'll keep saying, ye to nahi hoga, ye nahi hoga. You're trying this won't happen. And there are many such people. And they'll be there. You don't have to change them. But don't keep them very close. Your inner circle should be full of people who are saying, you've got this. You've got this. You'll do it. You're trying something new. You've got this covered. Listen to podcasts which do that. Listen to influencers who do that. So surround yourself with positivity and you will always feel good about what you're doing. So those are my last three things that I wanted to leave you guys with, but open to any questions at this point. And of course, all the very best to all of you as you get out in the world of work after this.
Thank you, ma'am, for enlightening us with your inspiring words. Now we would like to open the floor for questions from the audience. You may raise your hand if you have a question, and I will ask you to unmute. Arshad, you can go ahead with your question.
Thank you, Rishikesh. Thank you, ma'am, for such an insightful session. My name is Arshad Ahmed, and I am from XAVION BM batch of 2023. Now, my question is, you have stressed a lot on the word perseverance, but I want to ask, like, how to make a balance between perseverance and not getting emotionally attached with the idea which is not working.
Yeah, it's a very good question. It's a very good question, and a lot of us struggle with it. Perhaps the best way to do it, and I'm a huge proponent of data. In anything that you're doing, have very, very quantifiable metrics for everything, whether it is your team or it's about the growth of your company, or it is anything which is non-personal should have data attached to it, is of course something again that I believe in. I know there are others who don't think that way, but that will help with exactly what you're asking, because at that point, if data is telling you that you're on the right path, you're growing, but perhaps not as much, or you're growing in certain fluctuations, data will be able to show you all of that. That will help you keep the emotion part out of it. The other thing I would suggest is in your co-founder or your co-team, get people who are behaviorally a little different from you. And this always works. There'll be clashes because of that, but this usually works. Because then there are people who think about the same problem from a different perspective, and you need that kind of thinking, and that also helps keep emotions out.
Thank you, ma'am.
Akanksha, you can go ahead with your question.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much, Aditi ma'am, for sharing your journey with us. So, ma'am, my question is that before you started off, right now, what's one thing that you wish you knew before you started off, or anything that you learned on the job and you wish you knew before?
Lots. And I always feel, when you start something, you obviously don't have all the answers when you start. And that's the beauty and the pitfall of a startup journey, right? It's not tried and tested. You're trying it for the first time. And I think especially for me, because I was coming from these large established companies like the World Bank, like BCG. So really starting something from scratch and literally being CEO and doorman at the same time was a very, very big journey for me, where everything from creating the first version of a deck to literally going and getting a printing done from a printer shop, it was for me personally, it was a big journey. But what the one thing that I think if I knew earlier, I would say perhaps being okay with letting go of 100% quality. So, when we started the company, because we felt the product was so personal for us and what we were doing was representing us, and our personal brand was so high in our minds that the product had to be perfect. The experience of the Indian candidates had to be perfect. The experience of the global employers had to be perfect. But growth cannot happen with that much perfection. So it's only in the last, I would say 6 to 8 months, also with a very chance conversation that I had with a friend of mine, also ex-BCG, who's now been part of 3 unicorns. So he's seen that growth of various edtech companies, where he told me, Aditi, if you want to do growth, it's okay to let go of even 5% of your quality. Because with that 5% quality drop, if you can reach, 100x growth, it's fine. Don't take it so personally, to the previous person who asked me, because you get so emotional about your product. You want to give it everything. So that's when I think that if I had known that at the start, I think our growth journey could have started 2 years before. So the 8 months before could have been 2 years before. So today, instead of the 2,000 order book that we have now in February, I think we would have been at probably 4,000. That's the only difference. But yes, I think that's my big learning. Let go a little bit of the quality. It's fine. You can't have it perfect all the time.
Vikhyat, you may go ahead with your question now.
Good evening, ma'am. Thank you for being here today with us. My name is Vikhyat, and I'm from the XAVION BM batch of 21-23. Ma'am, my question typically is that what really matters to succeed in the corporate world? I mean, is it soft skills? Should there be technical proficiency, understanding of people, or is there something that we are completely missing or should really build up on?
Okay. No one answer, of course, because every sector is different. Obviously, if you're in the heavy tech space, you will need technical skills, right? If you join an AI company, they're not going to hire you for your soft skills. They're going to hire you for the technical skills that you're bringing to the table. But overarchingly, I would say I prefer to hire for the people first, because I personally feel, and I know my senior management team also thinks, skills can be built, but personality is difficult to build. So I'd rather hire people in my team, especially in a startup where you want those strong pillars with you, those loyal, strong pillars who will be in your growth journey, where I'd rather hire them for their personality, which is, to have that can-do attitude, to get it done, to be very, very pushy for outcomes, to really have the interest of the company first. So there are all of these things that we look for. Motivation is, number one that we look for, but I'd rather hire for personality and build the skills. But one caveat there depends on the level you are in the company. Obviously, I can't hire someone in my senior management team for their personality. I will hire them for what they're bringing to the table, also on their technical skills. But for the associates who we have, or the analysts that we have, definitely hiring them for personality and building the skills.
Thank you, ma'am.
Piyush, please go ahead with your question.
Yeah, hello, ma'am. I'm Piyush Kumar Naik from BM batch of 2021-23. Ma'am, it's a curious. I'm a bit curious about the thing which you said. Like you talked how how Magic Billion managed to understand people and like imparted the high quality skilling, deep talent management expertise and everything. Ma'am, what if when you recruit that person and bring him to that particular country, and when he goes there, and there will be lots of emotions flowing by, since you brought it up about retaining. Ma'am, how did Magic Billion work in order to maintain that EQ of the person who has been there?
Yeah. So a good question, because that then also impacts our client relationship. Because if somebody, we send to Germany, let's say, and now we are sending so many, We don't want people there to go and then leave the employer in a matter of a month or two also, right? So yes, we have worked on this pretty deeply. So as part of our interview process itself, we have some psychometric testing to see how people are behaviorally. You know, are they strong in personality? Are they, you know, do they keep their our families back in India very, very important for them, because those ones we know get homesick very, very quickly when they leave, and they typically want to come back. So we've got a psychometric testing, which we do just to ensure that we are picking the right kind of people. We also do culture immersion for the employers. So, you know, because most often they've never hired even foreign talent, forget Indian talent, but they've not even hired any foreign talent before. So how to deal with foreign talent, how, you know, the fact that a German could be very, very different from an Indian on so many metrics. So really to provide them with culture immersion as well. And also the Indians, we provide a lot of culture immersion. So they understand what to expect when they reach. But yes, I think 1% so far in the ones we have sent out, 1% of them we have had a little bit of a challenge, which does need to be managed. At the end of the day, it's human beings. So you can only manage so far. Beyond that, it's just what they decide to do in that particular situation. So we've tried to put in place as many tools as possible to ensure that this doesn't happen. But we still do see about a 1% kind of lot which wants to come back or does create a little bit of mess in that country, but manageable.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Indrajit, please go ahead.
Thank you, ma'am, for your keynote. I'm Indrajit Ghosh from the XAVION BM batch of 21-23. Ma'am, you talked about how you essentially operate in a space where there are a lot of trust issues because of scams, etc. So how do you actually get people to choose you when obviously those operators will be offering something very unreasonable and like ungettable?
Yeah, fair. So honestly speaking, the first year was extremely difficult for us. And the ones who chose us for either me or for Basab, who's my father and co-founder. They trusted us, not the brand, because the brand didn't exist, right? But today the situation is very different because we already have about 1,800 people who are in multiple destinations, right? So now that data is speaking for itself, and we've got, you know, a lot of candidates from here either want to connect with one of them to see how their experience has been and all of that. So now we have an alum network to speak for their experience, which we didn't have in the first year. So in the first year, purely our brand and, you know, what we personally did, we personally pitched our products to people, you know, and asked them to trust us over what we are taking to the market. The other thing I would say there is, because we are running these skilling programs now, most often about 50% of our candidates actually get the offer letters and then stay with us for 6 months, where they learn language, etc., with us before they travel. So they are also part of our trust building exercise because they've got their offers in hand, they've met the employers virtually. So their level of trust is also much higher. So when the newbies come, this lot also supports with our trust building because they're still in India, but they've got line of sight to the foreign countries already. So they're part of our army of trust builders. But slowly, I think as we build our brand, and there's a lot of work on brand building, which we are focusing on this year in particular, as we build our brand, hopefully, you know, we will become synonymous with trust.
Thank you, ma'am.
Now I would request Harsh to unmute.
Hello, ma'am. A warm good evening to you. This is Harshit Agarwal from the XIMB BM batch of 21-23. My question to you is that since you have lived in both London as well as in India, how do you view the startup ecosystem between the two?
Yeah. Actually, I've lived in the US as well. So I can talk about all three to you because they are in the top three sort of markets. Look, in the US, the culture of startups is ingrained.
right? Like even as a 10-year-old, kids are asked to fix their own bikes, right? They've got these big garages and kids are, if their bike breaks down, parents will provide them with the tools and then you're supposed to fix it yourself. And I think that kind of culture just builds that interest in wanting to do your own thing because you've done your own thing all your life, right? So in the US, it's infectious on the West Coast, not on the East, but on the West Coast, it's infectious. You walk anywhere, any coffee shop, you've got all these startup founders sitting there and, working. That's the US. In India, it's really building. Like I was telling you, I mean, in the last 15 years back, we would not be having these conversations, but today we are. So I'm definitely feeling this energy. The fact that just in my circle, there are so many startup founders or, people in the sort of senior management teams of startups. I think it shows that this culture is building in a big way. It's building in a big way. Every day in every newspaper, whether it's FT or it's Times of India or whatever, there are so many startup stories talked about, right? So I think that energy is building, which is brilliant. It's the best way. And now I'm noticing that even in the families, my age group, which has kids, they are now moving to that thing of, do your own thing. So I have a friend of mine, I met her last night, lives in India, BCG partner. And she was talking about her 12-year-old who started her own, at 12, she has started her own pet food business. So in NCR, she set up her own website, she set up her own commercials, everything, pet food business she started off for herself. She's a 12-year-old. So clearly, I think that energy is building. In the UK, I will say that it's a little bit different. It's not as infectious, the energy. It's happening a lot, but it's not as infectious. So every second person is not talking startups, which is what I feel in India is happening now. In the UK, it's more reserved. It's a little bit less risky. There are some large organizations like Google, etc., who have Google X and DeepMind and all running out of here, which are sort of their startup arms within large corporates. But as such, I feel it's not as vibrant, at least in my perspective. It's not as vibrant. And does that answer your question?
Thank you, ma'am, for your valuable insights.
Abhipsa, you can unmute.
A very good afternoon, ma'am. My name is Abhipsa. I'm from the BM batch of 21-23. And before I ask my question, I really want to thank you for such an amazing session. It was short, but it was really nice. So if there would be, if you were to give one key advice to our students who are basically aspiring to be entrepreneurs, what would you have for us?
Yeah. See, one thing doesn't work for everyone. So what worked for me would not work for you, would not work for, what worked for Abhipsa will not work for Akanksha, will not work for Pushkar. It won't work like that, right? So what I've tried to do in this talk is just give you a sense of the things which worked for me, so you can grab out of this what you think will work for you. But I do think that the three things that I spoke about, when I said these are my three tenets, those would be the things. If you remember anything from these 40-50 minutes we've spent together, I would want you to remember those three things. So I can repeat it very quickly. So the first one was to own your decisions. Make your decisions and own your decisions and give it everything. So to me, that's a very key thing, whether you start your own company or not. If you don't own your decisions, it's not going to happen because you'll always have an excuse to go back to. So owning decisions is a big one. Managing failures, a huge one. If you don't know how to manage failure, if you break down, remember, if you start a company, there are people looking at you. There's an entire team below you looking at you. So if you can't deal with failure, the startup is anyway doomed for, right? So understanding failure, being okay with it is again the second big thing, which I think I've learned, and I learn it every day. And I actively try to learn it through various podcasts, etc., that I listen to. So that's the second. And then third is, of course, the bit on positivity. And I don't say this lightly. This is not just jargon. I genuinely feel if you surround yourself with positivity, vibes work. You surround yourself with people who are constantly telling you no, 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 no. In your head, when you start something, you will first think this won't work. But if you surround yourself with positivity and constant reaffirmations, your outlook in life will change. And then all of it is sort of together, right? So if your outlook changes, you will automatically attract positive people around you. If that happens, you will automatically want to make decisions and stick by them. So it's sort of a beautiful, virtuous cycle of three things. So those three things, I think, Abhishek, I would keep close to me.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Akanksha, you can go ahead.
Hello, ma'am. I'm Akansha Ota from the BM batch of 2123. First of all, thank you for sharing your insights with us. So my question was, when we talk about startups and entrepreneurship, the term women entrepreneurship, it comes into picture. So according to you, currently, what are the gaps in India with respect to women entrepreneurship and how it can be really bridged?
That's a broad, big topic. Look, I personally am not a big fan of the whole hashtag women entrepreneur, only because an entrepreneur is an entrepreneur. I mean, I'm not dealing with any specific challenges in growing my company, which a man would not face. It's about the growth of the company. But where I think it does come into play is in the external world. So if I go for VC funding today, yes, I think I would have probably a different experience. So anytime there's an external situation, perhaps there's a woman gender issue which comes in any walk of life. I'm sure you see it in your business school, you'll see it in school, you'll see it anywhere, right? So I think that's the only place, but as a growth journey of a company, I wouldn't differentiate between a man or a woman. It's intellect, it's grit, and it's the product. You take it there. But I will say that there's a lot of effort which I'm seeing in the last few years, which has been made to particularly push up women entrepreneurs. And perhaps the reason for that is there are so few role models that who do other young girls look up to? Who do you, if you're only looking at male examples, you don't automatically identify with that. So there's a lot of effort that I'm noticing in the last couple of years, particularly where the visibility being given to women entrepreneurs is much more, which is a great thing because you need role models. If you don't have role models, it's tough, which is how I think people like Indrani and all, who are now, they've got so much going for them. When they're talking about their journeys, it resonates so much with the ones who are still on that journey. So it's helpful to have role models, and I'm very glad that that's been happening in the last couple of years. But long way to go, Akansha. So hopefully by the time you get to where I am, we'll have a very different conversation.
Thank you, ma'am. That answers my question. Thank you.
Pushka, you can go ahead.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Thank you for the insightful session. I am Pushka Bilegavkar from XAMB BM batch of 2123. So, ma'am, you mentioned in your talk that almost 9 out of 10 startups fail. So, are there any specific mistakes you would recommend us to avoid while starting up or for budding entrepreneurs?
Again, from my perspective, let me caveat everything with this is just my perspective, right? Yes, so let me tell you, I always go with a rule of 3, and that BCG has ingrained in me, so I can't take that away from me. Everything is a rule of 3. So the first thing I think to avoid as a pitfall is not hiring the right people. So typically what happens is when you're starting out a company, you're cash strapped. right? You have less funding because at least you'll have to have that MVP in place or something in place to take to the market. But before that, you don't have the right people around you. So I think the mistake that a lot of people make is they take a very substandard team and say, let's create something, let's create just something. But to get the right people around very early on is a very good idea, because they are the ones who will brainstorm with you and make your product better than what it is. So one pitfall to avoid is to say, I don't have the money and therefore I can't get the right people. Everybody doesn't come for the money. Sell the vision, but get the right people. So that's one pitfall. The second pitfall, I think, would be not taking risks. This is what I do. This is what I set up to do. And now this is all I'm going to do. A lot of people are that way. But really to see, be agile in your movement. If you're seeing, the world has changed and now there's a requirement for something else, have that agility to pivot, have that ability to really morph what you have created to benefit what the market is looking for. So the pitfall that I'm talking about is not being rigid. Take your product, but be willing to modify it according to the requirement. I think those would be my two big pitfalls. No, I have to give you a third. So perhaps the third could be pitfalls. Perhaps the third could be too much splash too soon. So I've seen this, and unfortunately a lot of these guys have fallen on their face, because what happens is you sell the vision too quickly and you sell what you want to do too quickly to the world, not just to your team, but to the world. And then you are not able to keep up with the product that you've actually created. So my suggestion on this is, and we followed this approach, is first start small, but do it well. So that when you think scale and when you are actually going out and making a splash, you have something very concrete to take out there with data to say, hey, this worked. So, doing it small and building on it is a better approach than trying to do everything at one go and then fail. So that's my thought.
Thank you.
Amlan, you can unmute.
Hello, ma'am. Thank you for the insightful talk. I'm Amlan Rodaj from the XAVION batch of 21-23. Ma'am, as we can see in the current times also with the rise of series like Shark Tank or startup influencers, do you think entrepreneurs in India are self-sufficient to build this ecosystem and envision an ambitious Indian society, or a very green path towards a place where India is full of good entrepreneurs bringing up new unicorns?
Yes, absolutely. I think India is primed. There's a lot of young talent which is getting into this. There's a lot of support coming in from society itself. And, Shark Tank is one such example. There is a lot of money in the sector now, a lot of money. There is definitely ageism is out of this, meaning, you could be 60 or you could be 20 when you're starting something of your own. But previously, if you were 20-year-old, this was the attitude, which has gone away from the startup sector. So yes, I think India is absolutely primed at this point to get more and more new ideas. Look at the number of unicorns coming out. I mean, not just small startups, but startups which are being able to think and grow to that level. So absolutely, a resounding yes.
Thank you, ma'am. I do hope that we reach that scale someday.
Me too.
Thank you, ma'am. As we come to the end of the session, I take this opportunity to thank our guest Aditi Banerjee, ma'am, on behalf of Exceed XIMB for taking time out of her busy schedule, addressing us and answering our questions with valuable insights. Thank you, ma'am. We hope to meet you soon on our campus someday. Lastly, yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Please.
Lastly, I would also like to thank the wonderful audience for being patient and making this session interactive and successful. Now we have come to the end of the proceedings. Ma'am, do you have any parting words for us?
I just want to say it's been such an engaging chat, guys, and barely any drops. So I guess I've kept your attention. I hope you've learned something out of this time that we've spent together, and wish you all the very, very best. Do well. You all look so bright and energized. I hope you have a brilliant career ahead of you. See you, everyone. Enjoy your weekend.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. We request the audience to stay on call as the speaker takes her leave.